God, I saying to you today, this I says, where you're going. There are moments when life feels like a corridor with too many doors and not a single one marked clearly enough to trust. You stand there listening, not to the noise of the world which is loud and impatient, but to something quieter, something that speaks beneath the clamor. It is not the sort of voice that shouts directions or draws maps in bright ink. It is the kind of voice that asks you to notice where your feet are already pointing, where your heart leans when no one is watching, where your longings drift when fear loosens its grip. God does not always announce the future like a trumpet blast. Often he speaks as a guide walking beside you, letting the path unfold one faithful step at a time, saying in 1,000 subtle ways, "This is where you're going." You may have imagined that God's guidance would feel like certainty without effort, like confidence without trembling, but the truth is more honest and far more human. God's voice is often heard most clearly when you admit you do not know what comes next. It is in the confession of uncertainty that your ears sharpen and your pride softens. You discover that guidance is not the removal of all doubt, but the presence of trust in the middle of it. God is not merely interested in getting you somewhere. He is forming someone as you go, shaping your sight so that when you arrive, you will recognize why the journey mattered. Consider how often you have asked for signs, while ignoring the steady pattern God has already woven into your life. Look back, not with regret, but with honesty. You will see that even your detours were not wasted. The disappointments that felt like dead ends were often corridors leading to rooms you could not have entered otherwise. God has been saying to you all along, through closed doors and unexpected openings, this is where you're going, even when you insisted you were lost. What felt like delay was often protection. What felt like silence was often preparation. There is a great difference between the future you demand and the future God reveals. The future you demand is usually shaped by fear, by comparison, by the anxious need to control outcomes. The future God reveals grows out of surrender. It unfolds slowly enough to keep you dependent, clear enough to keep you moving, mysterious enough to keep you humble. God does not overwhelm you with the full picture because he desires relationship, not mere compliance. He wants you to walk with him, not sprint ahead of him with borrowed certainty. You may wonder why the path forward feels narrow, why the way seems to require so much patience and trust. But narrow paths often lead to wide horizons. God is teaching you to walk steadily before he invites you to run freely. He is strengthening your character so that when opportunity meets you, it will not crush you. Many have arrived too quickly at places their souls were not ready to inhabit. God, in his mercy, delays not to punish, but to prepare. He is saying, even now, this is where you're going. But first you must become someone who can live there without losing yourself. Notice how God uses ordinary moments to speak extraordinary truth, a conversation that lingers in your mind longer than expected, a verse that refuses to remain on the page and instead takes residence in your thoughts, a restlessness that no distraction can soothe. These are not accidents. God is patient enough to speak through whispers and persistent enough to repeat himself until you listen. The direction of your life is not hidden from you because God is secretive. It is hidden because it is sacred, revealed gradually so that reverence grows alongside understanding. You might be tempted to believe that if God were truly guiding you, the road would be smooth and the signposts obvious. Yet history, both sacred and personal, tells a different story. God often leads his people through uncertainty precisely because certainty can become an idol. When you are forced to trust rather than predict, you discover that faith is not blind optimism, but a disciplined attention to God's character. You learn that the one who calls you forward is faithful even when the path ahead is dimly lit. There is something deeply transforming about realizing that God's guidance is less about geography and more about formation. He is not merely pointing to a destination, he is inviting you into a way of being. Where you're going is not only a place or a role or a season, it is a deeper alignment with truth, a fuller participation in love, a sturdier hope that does not depend on circumstances. God is saying to you today, this is where you're going, meaning this is the kind of person you are becoming. Someone who trusts me not because life is easy, but because I am good. Think of how often you have underestimated the power of small obedience. You wait for a grand calling while God asks for a simple step. You wait for clarity while God invites faithfulness. Yet every small yes shapes the road ahead. The future is not built only on dramatic moments, but on quiet decisions repeated over time. God is not in a hurry, but He is purposeful. Each step you take in trust is a declaration that you believe He knows the way, even when you do not. It may surprise you to realize that God often confirms direction, not by removing obstacles, but by giving you courage to face them. Resistance does not always mean you are going the wrong way. Sometimes it is evidence that what lies ahead matters deeply. Growth, by its very nature, stretches what is comfortable. God does not promise ease, but He does promise presence. And presence, once truly known, becomes more valuable than certainty. You may feel as though others are moving faster, achieving more, arriving sooner. Comparison is a subtle thief of peace, convincing you that God's timing is unfair or His plan insufficient. But God is not managing a race where speed determines worth. He is cultivating unique stories, each unfolding according to a wisdom larger than human metrics. Where you are right now is not a mistake. It is a chapter, necessary and intentional, shaping the story only you can live. Listen carefully to the desires God has placed within you, not the fleeting wants that change with mood or trend, but the deeper longings that persist through disappointment. These longings are often clues, not commands, but invitations. God speaks through them, not promising that every desire will be fulfilled exactly as imagined, but assuring you that none of them are wasted. He refines them, redirects them, and sometimes fulfills them in ways that surprise you with their goodness. You might think that faith means ignoring your questions, but God welcomes them. Honest questions are often signs of engaged belief, not failing trust. God is not threatened by your uncertainty. He is patient with your doubts and gentle with your fears. He knows that understanding grows through wrestling as much as through waiting. As you bring your questions to Him, you may find that answers arrive not all at once, but in pieces, sufficient for each day. There is a quiet assurance that begins to settle in when you realize that God's guidance is not fragile. You cannot accidentally step outside His reach. Even your missteps are not beyond His ability to redeem. This does not excuse carelessness, but it relieves the crushing pressure of perfection. God is a redeemer, not a mere director. He weaves even your mistakes into the larger pattern of grace, teaching you humility, resilience, and dependence. When God says to you, this is where you're going, He is not merely describing a future event. He is inviting you into trust today. The destination matters, but so does the posture with which you walk toward it. Faith is lived forward, one day at a time, not backward in regret or forward in anxious speculation. God meets you in the present moment, offering enough light for the next step and enough grace for the journey. You may be tempted to wait until you feel ready, until fear subsides or confidence swells, but readiness often follows obedience rather than preceding it. God does not call the fully prepared, He prepares those He calls. As you move forward in trust, you will discover strengths you did not know you possessed, sustained by a grace you did not earn. God's call is not a burden placed on your shoulders alone, but a partnership sustained by His presence. There is something profoundly freeing about realizing that God's guidance is not a puzzle you must solve, but a relationship you are invited to deepen. As you learn His ways, you begin to recognize His voice, not because it is loud, but because it is familiar. Over time, trust grows not from constant reassurance, but from remembered faithfulness. You look back and see how often God carried you through moments you thought would undo you, and confidence quietly takes root. Perhaps today you stand at the edge of a decision, uncertain and weary. Or perhaps you feel suspended in a season that seems to go nowhere. Even here God is speaking. He is saying, not with impatience but with steady love, "This is where you're going, and I am with you now." The journey is not wasted because it is shared. The waiting is not empty because it is forming something within you that haste would destroy. As you learn to listen, truly listen, you may find that God's direction is less about changing your circumstances and more about changing your vision. You begin to see meaning where you once saw only delay, purpose where you once saw only pain. God is not merely leading you out of something, He is leading you into something deeper, truer, more alive than you imagined. And so you walk on, not because every question is answered, but because trust has taken root. You walk on because you have learned that faith is not certainty about the path, but confidence in the guide. God continues to speak, through scripture and silence, through community and solitude, through joy and sorrow, steadily reminding you that your life is not drifting aimlessly, but being gently, firmly, lovingly directed. Even now, as you breathe and wonder and hope, God is saying to you today, this is where you're going, and as you take the next step, you may begin to sense that the road ahead, though still unfolding, is doctor, awing you toward a future shaped not by fear, but by grace, not by chance, but by purpose, not by your strength alone, but by a love that will carry you forward even when the way seems long. And as that realization settles deeper into your heart, you may notice that what once felt like uncertainty is slowly becoming an invitation to trust more fully, to surrender more honestly, and to keep walking even when the horizon remains just beyond your sight, because the one who calls you forward is already there, waiting, guiding, and gently whispering as you move onward that this path, this season, this unfolding story is not an accident at all, but part of something far greater than you can yet see. And as you continue to listen, to trust, and to walk, you may find yourself standing one day in a place you recognize not because you predicted it, but because along the way you learned to know the voice that led you there. And even now that voice continues, patient and sure, inviting you onward as the journey carries on into what comes next, where faith deepens, purpose clarifies, and the road ahead continues to open in ways that invite you to keep going, keep trusting, keep believing, because this is not the end of the story, but only another step along the way. And as you move forward, you begin to realize that the direction God is revealing is not only about where you will arrive, but about who you are becoming as you go. And so you take another step, and another, aware that the path is still unfolding, aware that the story is still being written, aware that God is still speaking, saying softly but with unshakable certainty, "This is where you're going." And even as you listen now, there is more yet to be revealed as the journey continues, and the rhythm of trust carries you onward into what lies ahead, where the next chapter is waiting to be lived, and the next word is waiting to be spoken as you walk on, and the voice continues. And as that voice continues, it does not rush you, because God is never frantic about time, though He is perfectly attentive to it. He knows the weight of every second you carry and the quiet urgency that presses against your heart. He understands how the waiting stretches you, how unanswered prayers feel heavier at night, how hope can feel fragile when the days repeat themselves without visible change. Yet even in this, God is shaping your sense of direction. He is teaching you that movement is not always measured by visible progress, and that going somewhere does not always feel like motion. Sometimes it feels like endurance. Sometimes it feels like learning to remain faithful in a place you would rather leave. But staying when God asks you to stay is also a form of obedience, and obedience always carries you forward even when your surroundings remain the same. There are seasons when God leads you by desire, stirring your heart towards something new, and there are seasons when He leads you by discipline, asking you to commit to what is right rather than what feels exciting. Both are forms of guidance. Both are ways God says, "This is where you're going." The world often celebrates sudden change, dramatic leaps, and visible success, but God delights in steady transformation. He values depth over display, roots over rapid growth. A tree that grows too quickly without depth will not stand when the winds come, and God cares far more about your endurance than your appearance. You may find yourself longing for reassurance that you are not misunderstanding God's voice. That is a holy concern, and it reveals humility rather than doubt. God does not mock your desire for clarity. He often answers it not by giving you a detailed plan, but by strengthening your ability to discern. Over time, you learn the difference between urgency born of fear and urgency born of conviction. You learn the difference between pressure and peace. God's guidance may challenge you, but it will not crush you. It may stretch you, but it will not hollow you out. Even when the road is hard, there is a quiet coherence to it, a sense that you are being drawn rather than driven. Sometimes God's direction becomes clearer only in hindsight. You walk for a long time without understanding the purpose of the path, only to look back and see how each turn protected you from something you were not ready to face, or prepared you for something you could not have handled before. This does not mean God expects blind obedience without thought or prayer. It means that trust matures over time, fed by remembrance. When you remember how God has carried you before, it becomes easier to believe that He is leading you now, even if the destination remains unnamed. There is also a quiet courage required to accept that where God is leading you may not look impressive to others. Faithfulness is often invisible, and obedience rarely earns applause. God's path for you may not align with cultural definitions of success or with the expectations placed upon you by family, friends, or society. Yet God's measure of a life is not its outward recognition, but its inward alignment with truth and love. Where you're going may be a place of deeper integrity rather than wider influence, quieter service rather than public acclaim, and that does not make it small. In God's economy, faithfulness in obscurity carries immense weight. You may notice that as you follow God's leading, certain attachments begin to loosen. Things you once clung to for identity or security no longer hold the same power. This can feel like loss, and in some ways it is, but it is also freedom. God often removes what would hinder you from becoming who you are meant to be. He does not strip your life bare for cruelty's sake, but to make room for what will last. When God says, "This is where you're going," He also says, "This is what you cannot carry with you." There is a temptation to believe that once you understand God's direction, peace will arrive fully formed and permanently settled. But peace, like faith, must be practiced. It is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of trust. Even as God leads you forward, you will encounter moments of resistance within yourself. Old fears resurface, doubts whisper, fatigue sets in. These do not mean you have lost your way. They mean you are human. God's patience does not expire when your confidence wavers. He remains steady, inviting you again and again to place your weight not on your understanding, but on His faithfulness. Notice how God often speaks through Scripture, not as a set of abstract principles, but as a living word that meets you where you are. A familiar passage suddenly feels personal, as though it were written with your current season in mind. This is not coincidence. God's word has a way of unfolding alongside your life, revealing layers of meaning as you are ready to receive them. Through it, God continues to say, "This is where you're going," not always by naming the destination, but by shaping your values, sharpening your conscience, and enlarging your vision. Community too becomes part of God's guidance. Wise counsel, gentle correction, encouragement offered at the right moment all serve as instruments of direction. God rarely leads in isolation. He places others alongside you, not to replace your discernment, but to refine it. Sometimes they confirm what God has already been whispering. Sometimes they challenge assumptions you have mistaken for certainty. Learning to listen well includes learning to receive truth through others, even when it arrives wrapped in discomfort. You may wonder why God allows seasons where His voice feels faint. These are not punishments, nor are they signs of abandonment. Often they are invitations to grow in maturity, to move from dependence on constant reassurance to trust rooted in character. Just as a child eventually learns to walk without holding a parent's hand at every step, you learn to recognize God's guidance through internalized wisdom rather than external signs alone. Even in apparent silence, God is present, watching, sustaining, and guiding in ways you may not immediately perceive. As you continue forward, you may begin to notice that your prayers change. They become less about asking God to adjust your circumstances and more about asking Him to align your heart. This shift is not resignation, it is surrender. It reflects a growing trust that God's direction is wiser than your demands. You begin to pray not only for outcomes, but for faithfulness, patience, courage, and love. These prayers are often answered quietly, steadily, through daily opportunities to practice what you ask for. God's guidance also involves learning when to let go. There are times when a door closes, not because you failed, but because the season ended. Letting go can feel like defeat, but it is often obedience. God does not require you to cling to what He is finished with. He invites you to trust that release is sometimes the very thin G that moves you forward. When God says, "This is where you're going," He also gives you grace to loosen your grip on where you have been. You may be tempted to believe that the journey would be easier if you were stronger, wiser, or more faithful. But God works precisely through your limitations. Your weakness does not disqualify you. It positions you to rely on Him. Where God is leading you will require more than your own resources, and that is by design. Dependence is not a flaw in the journey, it is the foundation of it. Through dependence, you learn that God's strength is not theoretical but lived, not distant but near. As the days unfold, direction often becomes clearer, not through sudden revelation, but through accumulated faithfulness. You keep showing up. You keep choosing what is right over what is easy. You keep trusting when answers delay. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, you realize that you are not the same person you were when the journey began. Your fears have less authority. Your hope has more substance. Your faith, once fragile, has grown resilient. God has been leading you all along, not only toward a destination, but toward a deeper life. There is a quiet joy that emerges when you accept that God's pace is intentional. You stop rushing the process and begin to attend to the present moment. You learn to see God's goodness not only in fulfilled promises, but in daily provision, a strength that carries you through a hard conversation, a peace that steadies you during uncertainty, a small kindness that arrives exactly when you need it. These are signs along the road, reminders that you are not wandering aimlessly, but being guided carefully. Even setbacks take on new meaning when viewed through trust. Failure becomes instruction rather than condemnation. Disappointment becomes an invitation to re-examine motives and desires. God does not waste pain. He redeems it, using it to deepen compassion, humility, and wisdom. Where you're going will be shaped by what you have endured, not erased by it. Your story will carry evidence, not of a flawless path, but of a faithful God. You may notice that as you follow God's leading, your understanding of success changes. You begin to measure progress not by external markers, but by internal alignment. Are you more loving than before? More patient, more truthful, more willing to trust? These changes may not attract attention, but they matter deeply. They reflect the direction of your soul, which is ultimately where God is leading you. A life oriented toward love and truth is a life going somewhere meaningful, regardless of outward circumstance. At times, God's direction will require courage that feels beyond you. He may ask you to speak when silence feels safer, to forgive when bitterness feels justified, to hope when despair feels reasonable. These moments reveal the depth of your trust. Obedience here is rarely dramatic, but it is profoundly transformative. Each act of courage strengthens your capacity to walk the road ahead. God does not ask these things to burden you, but to free you from what would otherwise bind you. As you continue, you may find that your awareness of God's presence becomes more constant, less dependent on mood or circumstance. Trust matures into quiet confidence, not confidence in yourself, but confidence in God's character. You learn that even when you cannot see the end of the road, you can trust the one who does. This trust does not eliminate uncertainty, but it reframes it. Uncertainty becomes a space where faith is exercised rather than a threat to be avoided. There is a deep mystery in how God leads, one that resists simplification. He is both gentle and demanding, patient and purposeful. He invites questions but calls for trust. He reveals enough to guide you without overwhelming you. In this mystery, you learn that faith is not about having all the answers, but about staying responsive. God continues to speak, through conscience, through scripture, through circumstance, through the quiet assurance that grows as you walk. And so the journey continues, marked not by constant clarity, but by growing trust. God's voice remains steady, inviting you onward, reminding you again and again that your life is not random, your steps not wasted, your questions not ignored. He continues to say, in ways both subtle and unmistakable, this is where you're going. And as you walk on, listening, trusting, and responding, the road keeps unfolding before you, carrying you forward into what is yet to be revealed, where the story deepens, the faith strengthens, and the direction becomes clearer, not all at once, but step by step, breath by breath. As the journey moves onward and the voice continues, guiding you still into what comes next. And as that onward movement continues, you begin to realize that God's guidance is not only something you follow, but something that reshapes how you see everything else. The world that once appeared chaotic slowly reveals a hidden order, not because events become predictable, but because your trust deepens. You start to recognize that God is less interested in arranging your comfort than in awakening your awareness. He wants you to see life not merely as a sequence of events to survive, but as a landscape in which His presence is constantly at work, even when it hides behind ordinary days and unremarkable moments. There are times when the path God leads you on feels quieter than you expected. You imagine that direction would feel dramatic, filled with emotional certainty and visible affirmation. Instead, it often feels like persistence, like waking up and choosing faith again when nothing has changed overnight, like continuing to love when appreciation is scarce, like holding on to hope when circumstances argue against it. Yet this quiet faithfulness is not small. It is the substance of a life that is truly going somewhere, even when the movement is inward rather than outward. God often each is direction by refining desire. You discover that not every longing deserves to be followed, and not every closed door is a tragedy. Some desires fade because they were never meant to lead you forward. Others grow stronger because they have been planted by God Himself. Learning the difference takes time. It requires honesty, patience, and a willingness to let God reshape your motivations. Where you're going is not only about what you will do, but about why you will do it. There is also a humbling realization that God's timing rarely aligns with your urgency. You feel the weight of unfinished dreams and unanswered prayers, and you wonder if you have misunderstood His direction. But urgency often belongs to fear, while patience belongs to trust. God is never late, though He is rarely early by human standards. He knows when a blessing would become a burden if given too soon. He knows when waiting will deepen gratitude rather than bitterness. Even delay is a form of guidance, steering you away from outcomes that would harm rather than help. As you walk on, you may notice that God's direction sometimes contradicts your instincts. You are inclined to protect yourself, to avoid vulnerability, to choose what feels safest. God, however, may lead you toward honesty that costs you, toward generosity that stretches you, toward forgiveness that feels undeserved. These moments reveal the difference between self-preservation and transformation. God is not guiding you merely to survive, but to become fully alive, and that often requires courage that goes beyond instinct. You may struggle with the feeling that you should be further along by now, that others seem to have clearer paths or quicker progress. Yet God does not measure growth by comparison. He sees the unseen battles, the private victories, the silent endurance that never makes headlines. Where you're going cannot be rushed without being distorted. Some things must be learned slowly to be learned well. Some strengths are built only through repetition, through choosing faith again and again in ordinary circumstances. God's guidance also teaches you to live with mystery. You learn that not every question will receive an immediate answer, and not every tension will resolve neatly. Faith does not eliminate mystery. It teaches you how to dwell within it without despair. You discover that mystery is not the absence of meaning, but the presence of depth. God invites you to trust that what you do not yet understand will make sense in time, even if not in the way you expect. As you continue, you may begin to see that God's direction often involves unlearning as much as learning. You unlearn the belief that your worth depends on achievement. You unlearn the habit of equating success with visibility. You unlearn the assumption that faith should always feel certain. In their place, you learn trust, humility, and perseverance. These lessons are not easily acquired, but they shape a life capable of receiving. What God is preparing. There are moments when God's guidance becomes most apparent in hindsight. You look back on a season you once resented and see how it strengthened your compassion. You remember a disappointment that redirected you towards something more fitting. You recall a loss that stripped away illusions and revealed what truly mattered. God does not erase pain, but He redeems it, weaving it into a story that carries meaning rather than regret. You may find that as you follow God's leading, your sense of identity grows steadier. You are less defined by circumstances and more anchored in relationship. When success comes, it no longer inflates you. When failure comes, it no longer destroys you. God is shaping you into someone who can walk through varied terrain without losing direction. Where you're going requires this steadiness, because the future God prepares often demands character before competence. There is a quiet discipline involved in learning to listen. God's voice is not drowned out by noise because it is weak, but because attentiveness must be practiced. Learn to make space for silence, to resist the constant pull of distraction. In stillness, you begin to notice how God speaks through conviction rather than compulsion, through invitation rather than force. His guidance respects your freedom, even as it calls you forward. Sometimes God confirms direction through peace, but not the shallow peace of comfort. It is a deeper peace that remains even when circumstances are challenging. This peace does not deny difficulty, it coexists with it. It reassures you that, though the road may be hard, you are not walking against the grain of God's will. This kind of peace becomes a compass, steadying you when emotions fluctuate and opinions change. As you move forward, you may encounter resistance from others who do not understand the path you are on. Their confusion or criticism can shake your confidence if you allow it, but God's direction is not determined by consensus. He calls individuals, not crowds. While wisdom from others matters, obedience ultimately rests between you and God. Learning to walk this balance, receptive yet resolute, is part of the journey. You may also discover that God's guidance is inseparable from love. The direction He leads you in will draw you toward greater compassion, deeper honesty, and wider mercy. If a path hardens your heart, isolates you from others, or feeds pride, it is worth examining closely. God's way may challenge you, but it will always move you toward love, because love is the destination as much as the means. There are days when faith feels light and days when it feels heavy. God does not withdraw on the heavy days. He remains steady and patient, even when your trust feels thin. You learn that faithfulness is not measured by emotional intensity, but by continued presence. Showing up, praying when words feel empty, trusting when certainty feels distant, these acts shape a resilient faith that can carry you forward. Over time, you may notice that God's direction begins to feel less like a command and more like a shared movement. You sense partnership rather than pressure. You are not dragged forward against your will, but drawn forward by growing desire. God's will and your will slowly align, not because you lose yourself, but because you find yourself in Him. This alignment is subtle, formed over years rather than moments, but it is profound. You may begin to see that where you're going is not merely about personal fulfillment, but about service. God's guidance often leads you into spaces where your growth becomes a gift to others. Your experiences, your struggles, your questions all become resources. through which God brings encouragement, understanding, and hope. Direction is not only for your benefit, it is part of a larger story of grace unfolding through many lives. As the journey continues, you realize that God's guidance is not something you graduate from. Even when you arrive at one destination, another journey begins. Faith does not end with arrival, it deepens. Each sun brings new questions, new challenges, new invitations to trust. God continues to speak, not always with new instructions, but with renewed assurance that He remains with you, leading still. You may also notice that gratitude becomes more natural as trust grows. You begin to appreciate small signs of God's care that once went unnoticed. Gratitude does not erase longing, but it anchors it. It reminds you that even as you look ahead, you are already surrounded by evidence of God's faithfulness. This awareness strengthens your confidence that the future, though unknown, is held by the same hands that have sustained you thus far. There is a deepening freedom that comes with accepting that God's guidance will not eliminate risk. Faith always involves stepping into what you cannot fully control. But this risk is not reckless. It is grounded in trust that God's wisdom surpasses your foresight. You learn that safety is not found in certainty, but in relationship. Walking with God may feel risky, but walking without Him is far more so. As you keep walking, the question slowly shifts from where am I going to who am I trusting? This shift marks a significant growth in faith. Direction becomes less about predicting outcomes and more about responding faithfully to God's presence. You discover that even if the road ahead twists in unexpected ways, you are not disoriented, because your orientation is toward God rather than toward a specific result. And so the path continues to unfold. Not all at once, not clearly enough to remove faith, but clearly enough to sustain it. God continues to guide through quiet conviction, through steady presence, through a growing sense of alignment between your life and His truth. Each step taken in trust becomes part of a larger movement, carrying you forward into what is still becoming, still unfolding, still being revealed. As the journey presses on, and the voice that has been guiding you from the beginning continues to speak with patient certainty, inviting you onward, deeper, further, into the life that is still taking shape as you walk, listen, and trust. And as you do, the sense grows that the road ahead, though still unseen in its fullness, is not empty or uncertain, but filled with purpose waiting to be discovered as the story moves forward, step by step, moment by moment, into what comes next, where faith continues to grow and the journey continues without pause, without finality, without conclusion, as the voice remains and the path keeps opening ahead. So let this be the place where your heart comes to rest, not because every question has been answered, but because you have learned whom to trust. You do not walk forward alone, guessing at shadows or chasing empty promises. You walk with a God who sees the end from the beginning, who knows the weight of your tears and the shape of your hopes, who has been guiding your steps long before you learn to ask for direction. What lies ahead is not chaos disguised as chance, but purpose unfolding at a pace shaped by love and wisdom. Even now, in this moment, you are being led. Lift your eyes then, not in demand for certainty, but in readiness for obedience. Let fear loosen its grip. Let comparison fall silent. Let impatience release its claim on your spirit. The road before you may still wind and narrow, but it is not empty. It is filled with grace enough for each step, strength enough for each trial, and light enough to keep you moving forward. Where God is taking you will require faith, but it will also reveal His faithfulness again and again in ways you could not have imagined from where you first began. And as you go, remember this above all else: the destination is not merely a place you will arrive at one day, but a life shaped by trust, humility, courage, and love. God is not only saying where you are going, He is shaping who you are becoming. Walk on then, with a steady heart and an open spirit, confident not in your ability to see the whole path, but in His promise to walk it with you, now and always, until every step has carried you fully into all that He has been quietly, patiently, lovingly leading you toward.